Hey, What's Your Self-Talk? Jabari is here from What's Your Self-Talk podcast. And listen, I want you to download Anchor right now. Because chances are you're listening to this and you're saying, I got some things I want to share. I have some things that I've wanted to put in a podcast form. Here's the opportunity. Anchor is free. You can do it from your phone and you can be on all the different podcast stations. All in one app, okay? So what I need you to do is stop waiting for the perfect time, analysis paralysis. Do it now. You'll thank me later. What's your self-talk? Hey, what's your self-talk? This is Jabari here again, live with you with another podcast of What's Your Self-Talk. And today, I'm pretty excited because I have a very, 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 very great friend of mine who is going to engage with me on this conversation. We're talking about being a Enneagram 7. And basically, Enneagram is a personality tool that is used to kind of help understand you individually and how you view life, spiritually, your work, marriage, and just all areas of life. And this has been something that's been super helpful for me to just also understand not only my strengths and weaknesses, but also my wife's and people that I interact with a lot. And so the reason I have this guest with me today is he happened to be an Enneagram 7 just like me. So I'm proud and excited to welcome my brother from another mother, Mr. Darius, Chef Dunaway.
What's up, my brother? Thank you so much, Jabari, for having me, man. I am so excited, not only because you're my best friend and you have this podcast, which is awesome, but also because I'm a 7 and I'm always excited.
You know what's very interesting is that we literally just sat down, get ready to do this podcast. I said, hey, I'm going to explain. I said, well, I'll just explain it to you before we get on the podcast. So that's, I think that's one of the fun things about us is that we are both happily married, have kids, and, you know, that 7, we don't get to practice it all the time because obviously our spouses are not 7. So that does, obviously, we need to make sure we lovingly serve them. And sometimes I would say, in a sense, hone down our 7ness to better serve them, which is a good thing. But also when we do get together, we turn that 7 up as much as possible. So what I want to do is, Darius is not only Chef D-Way, make sure you follow him on YouTube, but he is a FCA Christian athlete, and he works with the football players and basketball players. And so he really gets a chance to really interact with people, really dive into a 7. And so he's really in the field where he needs to be and to be a 7. So I would like him to be able to explain a little bit for those who maybe not be 100% as familiar why what is a 7, for him just to kind of give a little bit overview of his breakdown of Enneagram 7 and go from there.
All right, Jabari. So thank you. For me as a 7, I think I do have quite the best job because as a 7, I have no issues or no problem coming up to anyone and starting a conversation. And that's pretty much what my job is. I get a chance to sit down with different athletes and share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And even if things may look awkward or seem awkward, or somebody may say, hey, you may watch out for this guy. He's not really open to talk. He's very introverted, this, that, and the other. But it's just something about when I get a chance to get around someone. Doesn't matter what you are or whatever you are, you're going to feel my vibes. You're going to feel there's 7 vibes coming at you hardcore. No matter if it's just a small talk about anything. It could be just me giving you a water, getting a rebound for you, or picking up a football and helping you make some steps because I play football as well. My 7 most times can influence others and give them a different kind of energy or a vibe that creates conversation, that creates different opportunities as well. So as a 7, one thing that I don't have an issue with is approaching people. Another thing I don't have an issue with is being uncomfortable. It takes a whole lot for me to get uncomfortable. And lastly, for me, it may not be for all 7s, but it takes a whole lot to embarrass me. Like literally right now, I'm walking around with a hole in my pants, and I just didn't feel like changing them because it was a rainy day, and I just did not. I mean, I'm not saying all sevens like that, but just for me, I'm like, I don't care to change it. It's a cloudy day. I'm gonna wear my comfortable pants. And they got a hole in their knee. It's okay. But yeah, man, it's hard to embarrass a 7 unless a 7 is just. I mean, I got a lot going on, but for me, ain't much going on that people don't already know. So that therefore you can't embarrass me if you already know everything. and again, also the thing about the Enneagram as well, because I'm always on high. My wife being the total opposite, being a 1. I've learned how to operate around my wife, and she's also learned how to operate around me, which being sometimes I have to turn my 7 down to love and serve my wife as who's a 1, but sometimes she has to turn her 1 up to enjoy time with me as a 7 as well. So we learn our give and takes as well, and of course you learn that being around others as well. But yeah, 7s is kind of. It's not like we always loud and obnoxious, but most times we are. But we find the fun in almost everything. So
good. Now I'm doing my best to help out anybody who's not only familiar with the Enneagram, but to break down Enneagram for the other numbers who is not quite as excited or upbeat like we are. So if you was to use just a couple words to describe 7, I think one of them is an enthusiast. Very outgoing individuals. Joyful. Always flipping, whatever situation to positive, as they call reframing.
Yes. Or my wife says it all the time. Looking at things through rose-colored glasses.
Yes. Never take those glasses off. We sleep with those glasses and dream with those glasses.
Yeah. We're kind of like glass half full rather than half empty kind of people.
Yes. And so what has been helpful for me is I had a chance to go to an Enneagram conference, and I had a chance to talk to one of the Enneagram godmothers, as she's referred to, Mrs. Suzanne Stable. And it was very, very helpful for me to hear not only her breakdown of just all the Enneagram numbers, because it's a total of 9 for those who are not familiar with it, and just to hear some questions that I had mentioned to her directly and how she answered them. And so one of the things about 7s is not only obviously we talked about the strengths, I'm going to tap in a little bit of the weaknesses. And so one of the things I asked Mrs. Suzanne was, we are constantly reframing. That's the name of this podcast, is What's Your Self-Talk. I'm always wanting you to flip it and turn it into, a good and positive thing, which is a good thing. However, one of the things we have to realize is that everything is not reframable. And we have to understand that sometimes things are just meant to be able to just process as they are. And that has been a big challenge, I think, for me. And I think if it's fair to say, that's for all 7s, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And this has broke down, I think, a lot in our marriages, because I have seen my wife, she's an 8. And so we have me and Darius have 2 different wives, but they have some similarities. But my wife is an 8, so that means she's a challenger. She's straight to the point. She don't have time for the fluff. Just get straight to the point and let's get it done. And she's trying to figure out why we still talking about this. And so something that my wife is very good at, she like having those deep conversations, which is very great because it really taps into like giving you deeper perspective on certain topics, whether it's marriage, whether it's politics, whether it's kids, whether it's just life, it's health. And so one of the things I had to realize that I have to enter this space more so that I can not only allow myself to not reframe, but just allow that uncomfortableness to settle, but then also to be able to see what do I need to do as far as changing my approach. And so what I asked Miss Suzanne was just kind of that, hey, I think we went to a conference, or not I went to a conference, and I had a chance to stand up and ask her and her husband a question. I just said, hey, I think my reframing is broke, and I want to figure out a way to do better at, dealing with, the difficulties that life do bring, because life, obviously you can't always have those color glasses on. And so one thing that she recommended was you need to study more about what's called dark emotions, and actually be able to maybe volunteer to help people who may be handicapped, because you can't change their situation. You just have to accept them for who they are. And that was powerful for me, because I realized that the more that I can do this and process this, I become a more healthy individual, because I'm more diverse in how I can come across, but then also how maybe when I do need to tone that down, that's very, very important. So I'm going to all this to say is that, we have a very upbeat, positive side, but I want to also talk about, everybody very well know our strengths. That's something that me and Darius. And if you know either one of us, you like, oh yeah, I can't wait for them to come over. Like, it's a lot of fun with them over. Yeah. It is just that. But one of the things I was listening to is one of their Enneagram interviews, and it was interviewing a 7. I think not only that has been a weakness, but sometimes it's hard for us to be super upbeat all the time. And I'm just curious to know, Darius, what's your take from that? Like, when we are people who are constantly look at being super high energetic, either with family, either with, our work, whatever it is, like, how do you look at that when it's like, but dang, I don't always have it, but I have to make it seem like I have it?
That's a great question. Sometimes we are looked at to almost always be like the life of the party, to get things going, and sometimes you don't feel that as well as a 7. It's almost like a crash from a Red Bull. Like, you're like, bro, I am tired. I just want to relax, or whatever. I don't want to be that today or whatever. And that's kind of what Jabari was referring to. Some of the downsides of a 7 is we most time we push away things that are tough. Whether it's like the emotional, deep stuff, sometimes we tend to run from those things because we don't want to get into the mess. We don't want to get into the real thick of things. Most 7s operate in the head space, not the heart space. So we like to think through things and keep on moving rather than feeling things. We want to think through it and not feel it.
That's good.
And so I've been practicing on feeling things. My wife's been teaching me how to do that as well, how to slow down, listen, and feel. Which is hard for me, because when we go through, another thing about a 7 is the downside of a 7 when things are not going the way 7 wants them to go is gluttony. I tend to find myself, whenever I have a disagreement with my wife, I'm hungry, I'm gonna give me a sandwich or something,
Yeah.
And it's like 12 o'clock at night, I'm like eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I'm not even hungry. Like a fat kid. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Then, and the 7, another weakness of a 7 is seeking the approval of others as well.
Yep.
That's a downfall. If everybody's not happy with me, or love me, or giving me smiles and thumbs ups, then I'm like, oh crap.
Because that's what we're used to, and that's what we desire at the same time, right?
Absolutely. So those are things that I constantly practice, reminding myself of, to be more aware of those weaknesses and be more aware of how I can continue to grow through those things. So I take time to have intentional, tough conversations that gives me opportunity to feel certain things. I have a meeting once a week with my wife that says, hey baby, where am I feeling as a husband? Where am I feeling as a father? What can I do better? What can I do differently? Right? So I can stay in that space. When I'm having conversation with athletes, deep conversation with athletes, I make sure I'm listening, and I'm putting myself in situations where I'm like, okay, I can see, I can be there with you in this hurt. A kid just lost his dad, and his dad's in a different country, in Senegal, and he couldn't be there to see it, and I had to take a moment to rather than just talk through my headspace like, oh man, you're strong, you're tough, God is with you. It's like, no. I want to sit in this moment with you. I want to feel this with you, and I want you to know it's okay to cry, it's okay to let it out. Actually, I want to mourn with you in this moment. And that's some things that's something that you learn as you continue to. That's why Enneagram is so important. I didn't know that about myself until it was revealed. Until I read and did the research, and also had people who can interpret that, like Chuck Gershwin, who studied it as well as Jabari and other people. So Enneagram has helped me make my weaknesses stronger, but it hasn't helped. My weaknesses hadn't disappeared. I can tend to find myself, if I'm not finding myself where I'm enjoying Jesus and loving my wife well, and doing things in a consistent basis in a way that that's leading my family is very well, I find myself going back to those weaknesses and those tendencies of seeking approval or desiring to stuff my face with something because I got my feelings hurt or whatever the case may be. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, no. You did just that. I think the reality to the downside of being that 7 is not only that people depend on us, but we have to not only understand that what are the things that we have to go to, and we have to manage those things. Like, for us, emotions that's always on the high, when you need to drop those down, you have to put that in the right perspective. Because if you don't put that in the right perspective, you can eat and not know why you're eating, or you can be looking for others' approval and get to the point where you almost are mad because somebody didn't tell you good job at something. And it's so many different things that could happen when you're not aware.
Exactly.
And that's the point that I want to point out, being aware of not only your strength but your weaknesses, but seeing how they don't go away. And that's just going to be kind of a sense you can develop,
right,
and you can get better in those, which is part of this podcast. And this is to get better.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think when you as an individual, you cannot reject who you are, your personality, and who God created you to be.
Right.
You need to work on accepting that, but to move forward. And I think that's important to understand. We are made with limitations for a reason.
Right.
That's why we need spouses. They are better. My wife is the very opposite from me. And it's very good to have her. My wife is, I don't know. Now, she is you said we think from the headspace.
Yes.
Help me figure this out. So my wife is a doer.
Yeah, your wife also thinks from the headspace as well too.
Okay.
I think it's 1 through 4. Is more heart space. I could be wrong. Please forgive me if I am. And I think it's 1 through 5. I think it's 6 through 9. Is
no, you forget it's a gut, right?
Yeah. So the 1 through 4 are 5 things from in the emotional feeling space. And I think from 5 or 6 to 9, or maybe I think it's 5 to 9, is more in the headspace. They think through a lot more than they do feel a lot. That's from the research I've read, but this was 2 years ago. I don't remember the exact numbers, but that's if I'm thinking correctly, that's pretty accurate.
So in other words, our 7ness is coming out, and we're just saying it may be somewhat right, but I need you to look it up and
I'm about
verify.
80%. I'm about 80%. 85.
Look, well, you higher than me, so I don't really care at this point. But so I think that was just a little bit. My goal is just really wanting to just take a little time to talk with my brother from another mother about, just being Enneagram 7, and also what are the things and the challenges that we have to face. And maybe we'll do another podcast a little bit more, a little bit in depth, but I just enjoy the Enneagram, and I just enjoy, personality tests in general, but this one specifically because it literally gives you tools to help you say, that's why I do that. And it's so important to understand yourself. Self-awareness is big.
Right.
And I've been talking about in this podcast about accountability, and I've been talking about how you can learn and pull the most out of you.
Right. And
accountability is huge. Me and Darius are accountability partners, and that's one of the things we just wrapping up our meeting and wanted to kind of get into this a little bit. But man, I appreciate you taking out some time and being able to do this. What else you got?
Before you wrap up,
okay.
All right, me being the FCA guy, I gotta throw this in. I don't mean to be preaching, but I wanted to say this. The more I encourage you all to take the Enneagram if you haven't taken it. The Enneagram is not the gospel, of course, but the Enneagram is something that makes you aware. Satan has a way, a scheme to attack every person differently, right? And if we are aware of where our weaknesses are, we're more aware of how Satan is trying to attack us.
Oh, you preaching now?
Huh?
You preaching now?
Okay, now,
come on,
amen.
Come on.
So what I'm saying is that's why we see people who struggle with different things like looking in the mirror and not feeling beautiful, so they stick their hand down their throat and they starve themselves. Or you see people doing crazy things, the unthinkable things, because their weakness is being used and exposed by Satan. But if I know my weakness, I know how Satan's going to attack me by saying you ain't good enough, you're not a good enough father, you're not a good enough husband, or this, that, and the other. Then I can expose Satan's lies with the truth of how Jesus viewed me, knowing that I'm made in God's image to look like Him, right? Knowing that I am loved, knowing that I am chosen. So now I don't have to look for the approval of the people. I don't have to find the approval in what my wife says, even though sometimes she can say some things that's totally true and necessary, but it's also hurtful as well.
Amen.
But I don't have to seek the approval of my wife in that moment, but rather hear what she's saying. Even though it may come off as harsh, hear what she's saying. Baby, just help me pick this stuff up, right?
Yeah.
Baby, I'm tired from the kids, whatever the case may be. Even though she didn't say that. What I'm saying is Satan can try to use those small things if we're not aware and destroy us and make us feel like we're a whole lot less than what God called us to be. Who God has made us to be, you understand what I'm saying? I encourage you, take the Enneagram, not as something that is the new gospel or whatever, but rather as the tool that can help you identify areas where Satan is trying to attack you, and you can continue to grow and pursue how to continue to better yourself in those areas through accountability, through studying, through research, and also through the gospel. See, and you can combat those lies that we tend to believe with truth, so that's all I got. Sorry, I didn't mean to take over there.
Oh, no, you good. You just hit on, I think, a basic fundamental of whether you're in business or whether you are just living life, regardless of what area you are focusing on, we all have strengths and weaknesses. And part of our weaknesses can become an insecurity if we are unaware of it. And what you said is very true. The Enneagram help us, but also when you look at the gospel and you look at who is God, well, He speaks into those insecurities. But we can only allow Him to speak into those insecurities when we're aware that we are weak in something. And if we don't, then somebody else is going to speak into it. And that's when Satan is going to speak into it. So I think that simple awareness there is so important and critical to just think, I think growth, when it comes to a mental aspect, when it comes to a spiritual, when it just comes to you living life in general, because you are responsible for yourself and you are responsible for a family. Me and Darius, we are leader of our household and do our best we can every day to uphold that and do what God has asked us to do. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. And for you, if you never heard of Enneagram, I'll try to find a link to maybe a free test. You can be able to do it, and maybe I can be able to get Darius to come on with me again and talk a little bit more.
I'll do it, brother.
His Enneagram 7 talk right now.
I ain't talk about my
wife about nothing.
I ain't tell my wife nothing. I'm just already saying yes, I'll do it.
Yep. So, but
we'll figure it out.
Yeah. So obviously my feelings won't be hurt by that because I know that pattern by now. So. But there's
count me in, baby.
I love you, brother.
I love you too.
I appreciate you, man. And thank you for listening. Hey, if you found this to be helpful, make sure you do get a chance to be able to share this with one friend. Never heard of the Enneagram, or you have a friend who's Enneagram 7, or you've been just trying to learn more about the Enneagram. Look, here's a perfect time to be able to not only share this with someone to say, hey, don't tell them what they are. Just say, hey, just listen to it. Because one thing about Enneagram, you don't supposed to say, I think you a 1 or I think you a 2. Now just say, hey, just listen to this and let me know your thoughts. So that'll be a great way to just kind of share it in a confrontational way. So, but yeah, thank you for listening. As always, your job is to be able to take the information that we have on this podcast and to use it. And it's there to challenge you to ask yourself that question. What's your self-talk?